The silk of her dress was the color of a dare. A deep, impossible red against the warm brown of her skin, a slash of defiance in a ballroom of muted golds and polite champagnes. 18 years old and running the most exclusive charity gala in Tokyo, Noelle felt the fabric slide against her calves as she moved, a constant reminder of the role she was playing. She was the architect of this fantasy, the unseen hand guiding the crystal flutes to the right lips, the quiet voice in the caterer's ear, the one who knew where every emergency exit and circuit breaker was located. The air, thick with expensive perfume and the murmur of 100 conversations, was a symphony she had composed. From her vantage point near the orchestra, she scanned the room. Flawless. The ice sculptures were still sharp, the string quartet was perfectly in tune, and the Minister of Finance was laughing, his third glass of sake in hand. Competence was her armor. Her company had taken a huge risk on her, a young American woman tasked with orchestrating events for the city's elite. She had not let them down. Then she saw him. He was not part of the symphony. He was the silence that fell between notes. He stood near a marble column, a shadow in a bespoke suit so dark it seemed to drink the light. Others gave him a wide berth, a subtle, instinctual parting of the crowd like fish avoiding a shark. It was not his stillness that caught her attention, but his hands. One rested on the head of a silver wolf's head cane, the knuckles strong, the fingers long and elegant. The other, holding a glass of what looked like water, revealed the edge of a tattoo at the cuff of his pristine white shirt. Not a smudge of ink, but a dense, intricate tapestry of black and gray lines that snaked up his wrist and disappeared under the fine wool of his sleeve. She had a checklist on a tablet in her hand, 100 tiny details left to verify, but her eyes kept snagging on him. He was not on the guest list she had memorized. Men like him were never on lists. They wrote the lists. A frantic waving from her assistant, a young man named Toshi, pulled her away. The ambassador's wife lost an earring, he whispered, his face pale with panic. A diamond. She thinks it was near the terrace. Calm down, Noelle murmured, her voice steady. Tell her we will have the staff conduct a quiet search after the guests have moved to the dining hall. Offer her a glass of champagne. And Toshi? Breathe. She gave him a reassuring nod and turned to head toward the kitchens, needing to confirm the dinner service timing. She took a shortcut, a service corridor that ran behind the main ballroom. It was cooler here, the air smelling of bleach and chilled steel instead of flowers and wealth. The muffled sound of the orchestra was a distant heartbeat. That was when she heard the voices. They were low, speaking in calm, measured Japanese. She paused, pressing herself back against the cool wall. It was a private conversation, and her job was to be invisible. He is making a move on the port territory, one voice said. It was rougher, gravelly. He is impatient. A dog chasing a car he cannot hope to catch, the second voice replied. This one was smooth, resonant, and utterly cold. It was the man in the dark suit. The man with the wolf's head cane. He has become a problem. His people approached one of ours. A beat of silence. It was heavier than any sound. And what did our man do? He reported it. As he was supposed to. Good. Find the one who approached him. Make it an example. I want his head delivered to his master before the sun rises. A message that our loyalty is not for sale. Noelle's breath caught in her throat. His head. Not a metaphor. The tone was not one of anger, but of simple, brutal instruction. Like ordering a shipment or signing a contract. She felt a chill that had nothing to do with the corridor's temperature. This was a world beneath the polished floor of her gala, a world of violence that operated by its own terrible rules. She had to move. Now. She took a tiny step back, her heels scraping against a loose tile with a sound that was deafening in the quiet hall. The voices stopped. Absolute silence. The distant orchestra seemed miles away. She squeezed her eyes shut, her heart hammering against her ribs. Don't look. Don't turn around. Just be a shadow. But it was too late. A large figure filled the end of the corridor, blocking the faint light from the kitchen. The man with the gravelly voice. He took a step toward her. "Wait," the second voice commanded. The large man stopped instantly. Slow, deliberate footsteps echoed on the tile. They were unhurried, the sound of a predator that knows its prey is trapped. He stopped just in front of her. She could smell the clean, sharp scent of his suit, a hint of cedar, and something like cold night air. She kept her eyes fixed on the floor, on the scuffed toe of her satin heel. "Look at me," he said. The Japanese was gone, replaced by flawless, unaccented English. It was not a request. Slowly, she lifted her head. His eyes were dark, intelligent, and completely unreadable. They took in her red dress, the panicked pulse at the base of her throat, the tablet still clutched in her hand. He was younger than she'd expected up close, perhaps in his early 30s, his face a collection of sharp, handsome lines. A faint, silvery scar cut through his left eyebrow, the only imperfection on an otherwise flawless canvas. "You are the organizer," he stated, his gaze flicking to the lanyard around her neck, tucked discreetly inside her dress. "Noelle." He said her name differently than anyone else had, not with the polite curiosity of a client or the harried stress of her staff. He said it like a discovery, like an object he had just found and was deciding whether to keep or discard. I was just checking on the catering," she managed, her voice barely a whisper. "You heard what you were not supposed to hear," he said, ignoring her lie. His eyes held hers, and she felt pinned by the sheer weight of his focus. The world of champagne and ambassadors vanished. There was only this man, this corridor, and the terrible knowledge of what she had overheard. His man shifted behind him. "Boss, what should I do with her?" Ryosuke Tanaka did not look away from her. His gaze was intense, analytical, as if he were memorizing every detail of her face. "She is a liability," he said, almost to himself. Then, his eyes narrowed slightly. "And liabilities must be managed." He reached out, not to touch her, but to take the tablet from her trembling hand. He glanced at it, then back at her. "Your work for the night is over. You are coming with me." It was a death sentence delivered in a calm baritone. He turned and started walking back down the corridor, not even checking to see if she would follow. He knew she had no choice. The large man fell into step behind her, his presence a silent, immovable wall. Her career, her future, her life, it all dissolved in the space of a single, overheard conversation. She had walked into the wrong hallway, and he had decided she could not walk back out. The black sedan moved through the neon-drenched streets of Shinjuku like a phantom. Noelle sat pressed against the supple leather, the red of her dress a splash of blood in the monochrome interior. Ryosuke Tanaka sat opposite her, not beside her, the space between them charged with a terrifying silence. His man, whom he had called Sato, drove, his face invisible in the rear-view mirror. They had left the gala through a labyrinth of service tunnels beneath the hotel, emerging into a private garage.
No goodbyes. No explanations.
One moment she was the queen of her own intricate kingdom, the next she was a captive in a silent, moving cage. The city lights blurred past the tinted windows, a world she could see but no longer touch. "Where are you taking me?" she finally asked, the words feeling brittle in the quiet car. Ryosuke didn't look at her. His gaze was fixed on the city streaming by. "To a place where you can no longer be a problem." "I won't say anything," she said, desperation creeping into her voice. "I don't know who you are. I didn't understand what you were saying." He finally turned his head, his dark eyes landing on her. "You understood the word head, and you are a terrible liar, Noelle." The way he spoke her name was still a physical thing, a soft touch and a cold threat all at once. "You will stay with me until the situation with our rival is resolved. When I am certain you are no longer a risk, I will decide what to do with you." The car descended into another underground garage, this one beneath a skyscraper that pierced the clouds. The doors to a private elevator slid open directly in front of the car. Sato remained behind as Ryosuke led her inside. The elevator ascended with a silent, stomach-dropping speed. When the doors opened again, they revealed a sprawling penthouse. It was a space of stark, cold beauty, all glass, steel, and polished black stone. One entire wall was a window looking out over the glittering expanse of Tokyo. It was the most beautiful prison she had ever seen. "You will have this room," he said, gesturing to a door off the main living area. "You will not leave this apartment. My men are outside. They will not let you pass. If you try, they will stop you. Do you understand?" She nodded, her throat too tight to speak. "Good." He turned to leave, his presence already receding. "Why?" she choked out, the question escaping before she could stop it. "Why not just get rid of me?" He paused at the door to his own wing of the penthouse, his back to her.
For a long moment he said nothing.
"My organization has rules," he said, his voice low. "We do not harm civilians without cause. You, for now, are a witness, not an enemy. Your fate depends on whether you force me to reclassify you." He disappeared without another word, the heavy door closing with a soft, final click. The next few days were a blur of luxurious confinement. Food appeared outside her door, exquisite meals she barely tasted. The clothes in the closet were her size, simple, elegant pieces in muted colors. Nothing as loud as her red dress, which had been taken away. She was a ghost in his minimalist palace, wandering from the vast window to the sterile bedroom, the silence broken only by the distant hum of the city below.
He was rarely there.
He would leave before she woke, a faint trace of his cedar cologne lingering in the air, and return late at night. She would hear his footsteps, the soft click of his door. She learned the rhythm of his absence. One afternoon, seeking any distraction, she found herself tidying the main living area, a pointless act of rebellion against the inertia of her captivity. She straightened a stack of books on a low table. One was a heavy art book on Edo period woodblock prints. As she lifted it, a small, silver frame that had been tucked behind it fell to the floor with a clatter. She froze, her heart pounding. She knelt and picked it up. It was a photograph of a young woman with a gentle, smiling face and kind eyes. She was sitting under a cherry blossom tree, a shower of pink petals caught in her dark hair. She looked happy and utterly out of place in this cold, severe world. The sound of the elevator door opening made her jump. Ryosuke was home. Early. He walked into the room, shrugging off his suit jacket, and stopped dead when he saw her kneeling on the floor, the photograph in her hand. His face, normally a mask of calm control, went rigid. A darkness flooded his eyes, so intense it was like a physical blow. It was not anger. It was a raw, gaping wound of a look.
Pain and shame.
"Put that down," he said, his voice dangerously quiet. Her fingers fumbled as she tried to place the frame back on the table. He crossed the room in 3 long strides, his hand closing over hers, stopping her. His touch was cold, his grip like steel. "I didn't mean to," she started. "Do not touch what is not yours," he bit out, his voice a low growl. He took the frame from her, his fingers brushing hers for a fraction of a second. The contact was like a spark of static electricity. He stared at the woman's face for a moment, his expression unreadable again. Then he turned and walked to a heavy, ornate cabinet. He unlocked it, placed the photo inside, and locked it again. The click of the lock echoed in the silent room. He didn't speak of it again. But Noel had seen it. The one crack in his armor. The one vulnerability he carried. It was the face of a woman he had failed. The escalation came 2 nights later. Noel was startled from a light sleep by a series of sharp, percussive sounds from outside. Not gunshots, more like muffled impacts against the building itself. The lights flickered and died, plunging the penthouse into near darkness, lit only by the ambient glow of the city. Her door burst open. It was Ryosuke, a silhouette against the dim light of the hallway. He was no longer in a suit. He wore black pants and a dark shirt, and he moved with a fluid, predatory grace.
"Get up," he commanded.
"We're leaving." Fear, sharp and cold, shot through her. "What's happening?"
Rival clan.
"They're testing the building's security. They're not inside yet, but they will be." He grabbed her arm, his grip firm but not painful, and pulled her out of the room. Sato and another guard were in the living area, weapons drawn. Secure the exit route, Ryosuke ordered them. He pulled Noelle toward a section of the wall that looked like a decorative panel. He pressed a spot, and it slid open, revealing a dark, narrow staircase.
Go. Now.
She hesitated at the top of the stairs, looking back into the room. One of the massive windows facing the city suddenly crazed, a spiderweb of cracks appearing as another muffled impact struck it from outside. Sato was shouting into a comms device. Ryosuke stood in the center of the room, a pistol now in his hand, directing his men, a calm general in the heart of a storm. And for a split second, Noelle saw it. A red laser appeared on the wall just behind his head, then danced onto his shoulder. A sniper. From a nearby building. Sato was occupied. The other guard was facing the wrong way. In that instant, Noelle had a choice. The staircase was right there. Freedom. She could run, disappear into the chaos while they were distracted. It was her only chance.
She did not take it.
Down, she screamed, her voice raw with terror.
She didn't think.
She acted. She lunged forward, not toward the stairs, but toward him, crashing into his side with all her weight. The force of the impact sent them both stumbling sideways, out of the sniper's line of sight. A fraction of a second later, a bullet punched through the wall where he had been standing, spraying plaster into the air. He caught them, his arm wrapping around her waist to keep them from falling, his body shielding hers. He shoved her hard toward the secret staircase. Go, he roared, his face inches from hers. This time, she went, scrambling down the dark, narrow steps, his hand on her back urging her forward. The adrenaline was a roaring fire in her veins. She had had her chance to escape, and she had thrown it away to save the man who was holding her captive. The world had tilted on its axis. They ended up in a different safe house, a smaller, more anonymous apartment tucked away in a quiet residential district. The adrenaline faded, leaving behind a bone-deep tremor. Ryosuke sent Sato to assess the damage and secure their new perimeter. For the first time since she'd met him, Noelle was truly alone with him. The apartment was silent. He stood by the window, peering through the blinds at the street below. She sat on the edge of a stiff sofa, her hands clenched in her lap. He turned from the window, and his eyes fell on her. He crossed the room and knelt in front of her, his movements slow and deliberate. He reached out and took her hands, unculling her fingers. "Are you hurt?" he asked, his voice softer than she had ever heard it. She shook her head, unable to speak. His thumbs gently stroked the backs of her hands. His gaze was fixed on her face, searching. "You could have run," he said. It wasn't a question. The stairs were open. I was distracted. You could have been free. "I know," she whispered.
Why didn't you?
Her eyes met his. The silence in the room was a living thing, filled with the unspoken truths of the last few minutes. His body shielding hers. The bullet hole in the wall. Her scream. His proximity now was overwhelming. She could see the fleck of silver in his scarred eyebrow, the exhaustion in his dark eyes. She could smell the cedar and the sharper, metallic scent of gunpowder that now clung to him. "I don't know," she lied. But they both knew it was a lie. In that moment, saving him had been more important than saving herself. It was an instinct she couldn't explain and didn't dare examine too closely. He held her gaze for a long moment, then he let go of her hands and stood up, the distance returning between them like a shield. But the charged air remained. Something had shifted. He had seen her choose him over her own freedom, and she had seen, in the brief, unguarded moment he knelt before her, something other than a captor. The message arrived the next day. A simple white envelope slid under the door, delivered by an unseen hand. Sato snatched it up, but Ryosuke took it from him, his face grim. He slid it open with a thumb and pulled out a single photograph. It was a picture of Noelle, taken at the gala. She was smiling, talking to a guest, her red dress a vibrant beacon. Scrawled across the bottom in black ink were 3 words, "A beautiful weakness." Ryosuke's jaw tightened. The knuckles of the hand holding the photo went white. He had kept her to contain a threat, but now her very existence had become the threat. They knew about her. They had identified her. And they would use her against him. This changes things, he said, his voice a low rumble. They will not come at me directly again. They will come for you. A cold dread washed over Noelle. She was no longer just a witness. She was a target. Ryosuke's solution was counterintuitive and terrifying. We cannot hide, he declared that evening. Hiding shows fear. It invites them to hunt. We will do the opposite. We will be seen. His plan was to attend a high-profile art auction at the Park Hyatt, a place so public, so saturated with security and influential figures, that a direct attack would be unthinkable. It was a display of power, a declaration that he was untouchable. And by bringing her, he was declaring that she was untouchable, too. She wore a simple, elegant black dress, provided for her like everything else. As she stood before the mirror, Ryosuke entered the room behind her. He held a diamond necklace, a delicate, glittering thing. Turn around, he commanded softly. She did, and he stepped close, his fingers brushing the skin of her neck as he fastened the clasp. His touch was light, professional, but it sent a tremor through her. For a moment, his hands rested on her collarbones, his thumbs tracing the line of the bone. He was so close she could feel the warmth of his body. Do not speak to anyone unless I approve it, he murmured, his voice low and close to her ear. Stay by my side. Do not leave it for any reason. Is that clear? Yes, she breathed. At the auction, he was a king in his element. People deferred to him with subtle bows and averted eyes. He moved through the glittering crowd with an aura of absolute authority. Noelle stayed glued to his side, a silent, beautiful accessory. It was a suffocating performance. Then she saw a familiar face. A young, handsome man with a bright, easy smile was making his way toward them. It was Kenjiro Ito, the son of a tech mogul whose product launch she had organized last year. He was charming, ambitious, and completely outside of Ryosuke's dark world. Noelle. I thought that was you, Kenjiro said, his smile widening. He completely ignored Ryosuke, his attention focused solely on her. I haven't seen you since the launch. You look incredible. I heard you were behind the ambassador's gala. Brilliant work. Thank you, Kenjiro, she said, forcing a polite smile. Out of the corner of her eye, she saw Ryosuke's posture shift. He didn't move a muscle, but the stillness around him became glacial. Are you here with family? Kenjiro asked, his eyes flicking dismissively toward Ryosuke before returning to her. Listen, a few of us are heading for drinks at the New York bar after this. You should join us. It would be great to catch up. It was an escape hatch. A door back to her old life, to a world of easy smiles and harmless flirtation. For a moment, she was tempted. Tempted to feel normal again. Tempted to push back against the man whose possessive presence was a physical weight on her shoulder. She let the silence stretch for a beat too long, a tiny act of rebellion. That's very kind of you, but she started. She's with me, Ryosuke said. His voice was quiet, but it cut through the auction's polite chatter like a shard of glass. Kenjiro finally seemed to register the man beside her. He looked from Ryosuke's cold, impassive face to Noelle's strained one. The easy smile faltered.
Oh, I see. Well.
Another time, perhaps, he gave a stiff little bow and beat a hasty retreat. The rest of the night passed in a blur of tension. Ryosuke bought a 17th-century scroll for an obscene amount of money without even blinking. But his attention wasn't on the art. It was on her. When they were finally alone in the car, the silence was suffocating. He didn't speak until they were back in the safe house apartment. The moment the door was locked, he turned on her. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. The intensity in his eyes was more frightening than any shout. He backed her against the wall, one hand landing flat against the plaster beside her head, caging her in. Do you have any idea what you were doing? He asked, his voice low and raw. I was being polite, she shot back, her fear making her defiant. You were playing a game. You were enjoying his attention. You wanted him to see you as available. I am available. I don't belong to you. He leaned in closer, his face inches from hers. The scent of cedar and cold night was overwhelming. "You have been mine since the moment I found you in that hallway," he hissed. "You are a part of my world now, whether you like it or not. And men like him? They are prey. Do you have any idea what my rivals would do to him to get to you? His life wouldn't be worth the cheap suit he was wearing." The truth of his words hit her like a physical blow. Her defiance crumbled, replaced by a chilling realization of the danger she had so casually courted. "I didn't think." "No, you didn't," he cut her off. He stared at her, his jaw working, a battle raging behind his eyes. The anger seemed to drain out of him, replaced by something far more dangerous. A raw, desperate honesty. "Seeing him look at you," he said, his voice dropping to a rough whisper. "Hearing him ask you to leave with him. I told myself I was keeping you for my own security. A problem to be managed." He shook his head, a small, sharp movement. "I was lying. The thought of you walking away with him, of anyone else touching you, it is not a possibility I am willing to entertain." It wasn't a confession of love. It was a claim, a statement of fact, possessive, absolute, and terrifying. He owned her, not because of circumstance, but because he had decided it. And in that moment, staring into his dark, turbulent eyes, the most terrifying part was that she did not want to fight him. The rivals made their move 2 days later. It wasn't the frontal assault she expected. It was cleverer, more insidious. Sato discovered their plan through an informant. They weren't going to attack Ryosuke. They were going to use Kenjiro Ito, the charming businessman, to lure Noelle out. They had fed Kenjiro a story, that Noelle was being held by a dangerous criminal and needed rescuing. They gave him a time and a place, a quiet cafe in Ginza, and told him to get her there, promising him the police would be waiting to swoop in. It was a trap designed to isolate her. "We can't let him walk into that," Noelle said, her stomach twisting. "They'll kill him." "He is not our concern," Ryosuke said, his face like stone. "He's an innocent man. You said you don't harm civilians." "I don't. But I will not risk you to save him." That was the line. Noelle looked at the cold, tactical man before her and made a choice. She would not let Kenjiro die for her foolishness. She went to her room and found the burner phone Sato had given her for emergencies. Her hands shaking, she found the contact for Kenjiro's office. She had his direct line memorized from his product launch. She called him. "Kenjiro, it's Noelle. Don't go to the cafe. It's a trap. You are in danger. Go home, lock your doors, and don't talk to anyone." Before he could respond, the phone was snatched from her hand. Ryosuke stood there, his face thunderous. "What did you do?" "I warned him," she said, lifting her chin. "I'm not letting an innocent person die because of me. You broke protocol. You exposed us." "I saved a man's life." Before he could reply, Sato burst in. "They've changed tactics. They're not at the cafe. They're hitting the Ito Tech building. They know he was warned. They think he's with us." Ryosuke swore, a sharp, violent sound. The rivals had interpreted her warning as a sign that Kenjiro was now allied with them. They were going to eliminate him and his entire company as a show of force. Her attempt to save him had just signed his death warrant. Guilt, cold and sharp, pierced her. She had crossed a line. She had interfered, trying to apply the morals of her old world to this one, and in doing so, had made everything catastrophically worse. She had tried to do the right thing, and it had become a morally gray stain she could never wash away. "Get the car," Ryosuke ordered Sato. "We're going." "Where?" Noelle asked, her voice trembling. He looked at her, his eyes blazing. "You started this. You're going to help me finish it." The Ito Tech building was a gleaming tower of glass and steel, a monument to a world that was about to collide with Ryosuke's. They didn't go in the front. Ryosuke drove the car into a subterranean loading bay, the tires squealing on the concrete. He knew the building's layout, had pulled the blueprints on a tablet on the ride over. "They'll expect me to come in high, through the executive floors," he said, killing the engine. "They'll have men on the roof and in the lobby. But they won't expect us to come from below." He looked at Noelle, his expression grimly serious. You organized a launch here. You know the service levels. You know the event spaces. Where would you hide a man you needed to keep safe? A place with multiple exits, away from the main elevators. Her mind, trained for logistics and crisis management, kicked into gear. The fear was still there, a cold knot in her stomach, but her professionalism was a shield. The fourth-floor conference center. It has a dedicated catering kitchen with a service elevator that connects to this loading dock, and an emergency exit that leads to the adjacent subway station. "Show me," he commanded. He and Sato moved through the concrete guts of the building with silent, lethal efficiency. Noelle led them, her knowledge of back-of-house operations now a weapon. She pointed out security camera blind spots, keycard-locked doors they could bypass. She was no longer a victim. She was part of the infiltration. They found Kenjiro huddled in a darkened server room, his face ashen with terror. The rival clan's men were sweeping the floor, their voices echoing in the hallway. "We have to get him out," she whispered. "Sato will take him down the service elevator," Ryosuke said. He turned to Noelle.
You.
"With me."
What? Why?
"They're looking for you and a rich boy. They will not be looking for you and me. We are the diversion." It was insane. It was brilliant. He was using her event planner's knowledge to create a diversion. He led her up a back stairwell to the main atrium, a vast, open space now eerily empty. "When Sato gives the signal, we walk straight across the floor to the main entrance. They'll see us. They'll come for us. It will draw them away from the elevators. Can you do it?" She looked at his face, the unwavering certainty in his eyes. He trusted her. He was betting his life, and hers, on her ability to hold it together.
"Yes," she said.
Sato's voice crackled in Ryosuke's earpiece. "Clear. Now," Ryosuke said. He took her hand. His grasp was warm, solid. "Do not run. Just walk." They stepped out of the stairwell and into the open. It was the longest walk of her life. Every shadow seemed to hold a threat. Then they appeared. 4 men in dark suits, emerging from the hallways on the far side of the atrium. They saw them, saw him, saw her. They started moving, converging on them. Ryosuke's grip on her hand tightened. "Keep walking." His men materialized from the shadows behind the rivals, moving with a synchronized, brutal grace. The fight was over almost before it began. It was swift, silent, and utterly final. Ryosuke never let go of her hand. He pulled her through the chaos, his body a constant, solid presence, shielding her from the violence he had unleashed. They walked out the front doors of the Edo Tech building and into the Tokyo night, leaving the entire rival operation broken behind them. Back in the penthouse, the city lights felt different. Not a beautiful prison, but a conquered kingdom at their feet. The silence was not tense or awkward. It was calm, settled. Ryosuke stood by the vast window, looking out at the skyline. Noelle came to stand beside him. The adrenaline was gone, leaving a strange, quiet clarity in its wake. "Thank you," she said softly. He turned to her, and the mask of the clan leader, the cold tactician, was gone. There was only the man. "They thought you were my weakness," he said, his voice low and rough with an emotion he no longer tried to hide. "The photograph they sent, they were wrong. You are not my weakness." He reached out and cupped her face, his thumb stroking her cheek. His eyes held hers, dark and deep and filled with a truth that was more powerful than any declaration of love. "You are my reason." He had brought her into his world to control a liability. He had seen her choose him. He had confessed his possession. But this was something else. An acknowledgement. An elevation. She was not something he owned. She was something he fought for. A cost had been paid. Kenjiro was safe, but his company was in turmoil, his innocence shattered by a glimpse into a world he never knew existed. One of Ryosuke's men had been injured, a stark reminder that victory in this world is never clean. Nothing was free. Ryosuke's hand slid from her cheek to the back of her neck, his fingers tangling in her hair. He drew her closer, his gaze searching hers, asking a silent question. This was the final choice. Not to stay because she was a captive, but to stay because she was his. Because he was hers. She gave him his answer. She rose onto her toes, closed the small distance between them, and pressed her lips to his. It was not a kiss of passion, but of acceptance. A silent oath made in the heart of his empire. He did not pull away. His arm wrapped around her waist, drawing her flesh against him, claiming her in the quiet of the night. The city glittered below, a silent witness to the truth they had forged in danger and defiance. She had walked into the wrong corridor, but it had led her, impossibly, home.